So why do we celebrate International Women's Day? So International Women's Day is actually a global day to celebrate the social, economic, the cultural, the political achievements of women. It's a call to action for accelerating gender parity. So what are the goals involved in this whole celebration? Of course, we want to commemorate women's achievements. We want to raise awareness about women's equality. We want to lobby for accelerated gender parity or gender equality. And we want to fundraise for focused charities around the globe. There are two main organizations that promote this celebration or marking this day. One is the International Women's Day Foundation, and the other is the United Nations. So for 2022, the theme of IWD is break the bias. So why do you want to break the bias, right? What do you mean by that? So imagine a gender equal world, a world free of bias, of stereotypes, of discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. And, you know, with all these tenets in mind, together we can forge women's equality. So collectively, we can all hashtag break the bias. And for this International Women's Day 2022, the symbol is something like this. So I think if you go to any website online, you can post a picture of yourself. This is mainly for students who are interested in, you know, you're the future, so you've got to take this ahead. So collectively, we can all break the bias. The United Nations theme for this year's observance is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And that is basically to help promote and commemorate women that have contributed to a sustainable future, especially with respect to climate change. So in order to go about with this, we need to make a difference. We have to think globally, but we have to act locally. And together we can all thus break this bias on International Women's Day, that is today and beyond. We need to make every day an International Women's Day and not just today. Okay, so do your bit to ensure that the future for humanity is bright, equal, safe, and rewarding. So what have we done as a committee at NCL? We have organized a series of talks and discussions. We will start with the panel discussion on women in entrepreneurship roles, and we have our very own scientists as a part of this panel. Mr. Vikash Chaturvedi, also a student here at NCL, will be moderating this program. Followed by that, we have a wonderful talk by Nandita Jairaj, who's the co-founder of the Life of Science. And she's more well known for the hashtag 365 Women in STEM series that was going around a few months ago. After her, we have an illustrious advocate, a lawyer, Anand Grover, who will be talking about pedagogy in sexual harassment. So to begin our program today, let me hand over the floor to Mr. Vikash Chaturvedi. So he will moderate the panel discussion on women in entrepreneurial roles. Vikash, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for allowing me to moderate the panel discussion. So I want to first thank to all the organizers for providing this opportunity. And next, I want to share some slide. So are these slides are visible?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. And first of all, I want to wish International Women's Day to all the wonderful women working with us and to all the people. So man should equally participate in this mission, we can say. So I want to take you through the window of history. The impetus of establishing an International Women's Day can be traced back to the New York City in February 1908. Uh, there was a first protest done with the around 15,000 garment worker women, and the protest was mainly against the working condition, their working condition, long working hours. In the anniversary of those strikes, the next year in 1909, the National Women's Day was celebrated in the United States at first by the Socialist Party of America. And a German campaigner and socialist thinker, Clara Zetkin, proposed the International Women's Day and the equal voting rights for the working women's uh, at the International Conference of Working Women's in 1910. The first major impact was seen by Russian women when they demanded and gained the right to vote in 1917. This is also known as February or March protest, when more than 40,000 women protested against the First World War and the food shortages during the Tsar rule, Nicholas II, Russian king at that time. The movement is also known as Bread and Peace movement, and this was a very remarkable movement alongside the October Revolution, which is also known as Bolshevik Revolution. So in 1917, this demonstration brought the results, and they got right to vote for the first time. And it was then the Russia was using the Julian calendar, and the date was 23rd of Feb, which is equivalent of March 8 in Gregorian calendar. And in 1918, Russia adopted Gregorian calendar later. The United Nations first celebrated the International Women's Day in 1975. So before that, most of the socialist parties or socialist countries were recognizing the International Women's Day, but with the effort of in around 70s, Labour Party in Europe and other Western country, the effort has been done to internationally recognize the International Women's Day in 1975. And in 1996, the UN announced their first annual theme as celebrating the past, planning for the future for the International Women's Day. So this year, we are celebrating the Women's Day as Anu ma'am told you that this year UN's theme is gender equality today for a sustainable future tomorrow. And we are going for a panel discussion on women in entrepreneurial role. The panelists with us are Dr. Anuya Nisal ma'am and Dr. Manjusha Shelka ma'am, my own guide. So I am a bit little nervous also. Before that, I want to take you with the current status of the women in the business. So globally, out of three people, one women are one business around owned by the women. So these ratio are quite good in Latin America and Caribbean countries. Around 50% businesses are run by the women, and the situation in South Asia, especially India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Also in the North Africa, the situation is not good, where very few women are coming into the business, around 18 to 23%. So in our society, there is a lot more which is needed to be done. Uh, from Indian context, recently a TV show got very much popularity, Shark Tank India, and in that around 48% of the total startups which were given the participation at least had one woman co-founder, and around 40% of startup which got funding from the sharks are also having at least one women co-founder. According to Makers India report 2020, the state of women in tech entrepreneurship is not very good, and the data shows that only 5.7% funding goes to the women, at least one women co-founder startup, and this is even low with 1.43% in the startups completely founded by women founder. So you can see that in technological startups, this data is not very cheerful. So in 2021, we saw a 24% drop in the funding of women-led startups, which might be due to COVID or maybe that. But the initial data for year 2022 is better, and this funding is rising in women-led startups. And the 2021 was also the year when highest number of startups converted into unicorn, and only 10% of them were led by women founder. These are some notables women entrepreneur of recent time. You might be aware many of them. Vinita Singh, former IITian, Sugar Cosmetics. Namita Thapar is from Pune itself, MCure Pharmaceuticals, Ghazal Alak, known for Mamaearth. These three were also the part of Shark Tank team. Priyanka Gill, Upasana Taku, Ruchi Kalra, Falguni Nayar are some of other recognized women entrepreneur which recently converted their startup into unicorns. Falguni Nayar, Naika, was completely owned by her, while others are co-founder in their ventures. So the venture center data is even more interesting. The Pune is leading in tech-based startups, and venture center is playing a huge role in that. And 30% of all founders of a startup in venture center are women. 18% of all the startups are women-led, and 50% of all the companies have at least one women co-founder, and around 34% of all the employees of a startup are women, and these are mostly from science and technology background. So our panelists who are with us are all have started their startup with the help of venture center itself. And I would like to welcome both of you, ma'am, Anuya ma'am and Manjusha ma'am, in this panel discussion. So first, I would like to close this presentation, and so we can start, ma'am.
Yes.
Can you come? Should we come on this camera, or we should start with just the questions?
So keep the camera on, even for you, Vikas.
Okay,
so
I should keep.
Your...
I should keep my camera on, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. I want to start with this first question, which is idea to start this Cerigen Medi product by Anuya ma'am and the Rechargean Private Energy Private Limited by the Manjusha ma'am. So these are the companies which they have recently formed. So we are keen to hear about your embarking journey towards starting your own company. How does this transition took place from being a full-time working scientist to becoming an entrepreneur? So I would like to ask with both of you, Anuya ma'am and Manjusha ma'am, whoever want to respond first. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Manjusha. Excuse me, because can you stop sharing your screen?
I'm going first, Anuya. You are going first, or shall I go?
No, go ahead, Manjusha. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Vikash, and thanks for being here today to celebrate Women's Day. I know, being my student, I know that what kind of culture we have in our research group. So I think you are the perfect student to moderate this session, I guess. Well, so as you asked about how I thought about embarking on this journey of entrepreneurship or founding a Rechargian. So you know that you are being my student that well down the line, I say 5 years down the line, I did not even think remotely about incorporating a company, but indeed I was increasingly getting uncomfortable with the thought that whether the research that we do in our labs, for which such huge amount of resources are being spent, has any meaning for the society in general, or we are just reinventing the wheel with incremental decorations to the wheel and basking in a self glory of publishing very high impact journals and all. Of course, this realization came later, and initially I was also, oriented towards publishing the research. And I have been often questioned by friends and acquaintances who are not from the research ecosystem. So they used to ask me what is the use of publications of researchers for the society and why a taxpayer's money should be spent on research if the outcome is just publications. So of course, being a scientist, I argue very well against such comments, but somewhere inside I had also started questioning myself. And I know publications are indeed very important, but somehow we make that as an ultimate goal of our research, which I think need to be reconsidered, so, and it so happened that I came in contact with John Normanton, who is my partner from UK in my company. So he's a co-founder of Rechargian. So I came in contact with him through British High Commission and also through former director of NCL. So John is having decades of experience in academic startup management, and he was associated with Imperial Innovations for more than 10 years. So after knowing about our research on batteries, he suggested me to think about having a startup and to take this research to market. And that is when I also felt that I have got a purpose of making our research directly useful to society. But John was in UK and I did not want to leave my job at NCL. So we needed someone who can work full time for the company. So at the same time, my husband, who was working in Madhya Pradesh, he took voluntary retirement, from his job. So I have got a partner who can work full time for me and whom I can dominate completely. So it has helped that he is also a researcher with more than 20 years research experience on multifunctional oxide material. So that is how the team of founders was formed. And we had some very interesting solutions, energy storage solutions, which can potentially make our country import independent. You know that when it comes to lithium ion battery or electric mobility, the most of the raw material supply as well as component manufacturing and cell manufacturing has been dominated by China, the country with whom we don't have very cordial relations, right? So at the same time, we were also working on the alternate chemistries in our lab, which I felt the raw materials and the are easily available within India, and they can make us Atmanirbhar or self-dependent when it comes to energy storage solutions for electric mobility. So with that vision, I have incorporated Rechargian. And I must mention the help of NCL's Innovation Management Group, Dr. Vijay Kumar and Dr. Premnath, who helped me at every step to get approval from CSIR under Scientist Entrepreneurship Scheme. And the biggest advantage, I think, you also mentioned in your slides about Venture Center and how they are leading the innovation ecosystem in Pune, and not only in Pune. I mean, even though they are based in Pune, I guess that there are several startups from around the country that are incubated with Venture Center. So this is the biggest advantage for spin-offs from NCL, that we have Venture Center so close to us. And I have learned so many things from VC team that I never knew that I can do. And this journey has been very pleasant so far. This is very different experience, but in a way, this experience has given certain vision to my research group to align our research goals. Yeah, and we have incorporated Rechargen last year in May 2021, and we have been winner of a couple of prestigious competitions in clean energy area, and then we have recently got our first grant as well. So I'm really excited for the next steps on this entrepreneurial journey. Yeah, that's how the Rechargen has been born.
So great to hear, and we wish like to hear the journey of founding the Cerigen Medi products from Anuya ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. You are. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking the entire team, organizing team of the Women's Day celebrations at NCL, Anu, Sarika, Durba, Vikash, and all others who have helped to put together this event. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to talk about Cerigen and my entrepreneurial journey for Cerigen. So I'm just going to talk a little from the beginning. So throughout my educational career, I think even when I was doing engineering and even when I did my master's, I think I was always passionate about applied research. So science that could be converted into a technology and into a useful product. So that was something that always excited me, kept me going in my field. And that was the reason I had also joined John F. Welch Technology Center in Bangalore, some of you might know, before I joined NCL as a scientist. So joining NCL was a very, I think one of the best decisions that I've made in my life, because it was an opportunity to have the best of both worlds. NCL gives you the freedom to do basic fundamental applied research, publish in some of the best journals. You have the best infrastructure here. At the same time, you can closely collaborate with industry, so you can translate that science into a technology and actually see it, take it up to a pilot stage and see it being converted into products. So I think joining NCL there was like a really great experience for me. So after I joined NCL, Dr. Ashish Lele at that time was working on silk-based materials. He had a PhD student who was actively working with silk. And when I decided to do my PhD with him in 2009, we narrowed down on this topic of silk-based materials. So during my PhD, we actually looked at, we did some very fundamental work on understanding how silk-based materials flow. So basically the rheological properties of silk solutions, the protein molecule in itself, what kind of conformations it takes, how you can shape it, and how you can tune the properties of silk by changing the conformation of the protein. So this was very interesting work that we did, and we had published some very good articles based on silk in high impact journals. But at that point of time, when we were looking at the literature and the way it was evolving, we saw a huge potential for the silk in tissue regeneration. Now, India as such is the second largest producer of silkworm silk. So there is a very mature sericulture industry in India. We produce more than 25,000 metric tons of silk annually, and all of it was being consumed mainly into the textile market. So making silk saris and silk dresses and all. So in addition to that, there were also silk sutures. So the silk thread is actually used to stitch wounds. So medical application of this, there's also a record of silk being used in our ancient literature. And that is where we realized that this is a material that has an extremely promising future in the medtech industry. Parallelly, along with discussions with Dr. Premnath, we had also filed a few patents around how we could uniquely process silk to convert it into a scaffold. And this was done while retaining all its inherent medical properties or the biocompatibility, keeping it non-toxic and all of that. So when we looked at this idea, so we had a very good research understanding, we had a scientific expertise on silk-based materials, we were able to process it into a different structures, and we had a good IP around this base technology. We thought that this is, we went and started talking to a lot of surgeons. So we presented to hospitals, we spoke to surgeons, tried to understand what were the pain points, what kind of medical devices they were using, and where they see a potential application for this. And that is where we realized that while sericulture or silk is such a mature industry in India, India was heavily relying on medical devices through import. So we really import more than 80% of our medical devices. And I think that was a huge motivation for us to look at this as an opportunity to indigenously develop medical devices based on silk. And so we thought this is like a platform technology where we know how to convert the silk fiber into a solution and then process it to make unique biomedical products. It can be used to solve various tissue regeneration problems. So that was one aspect. The second aspect parallelly was also that, as Manjusha also mentioned, NCL has been the pioneer in setting up venture center. We set up our incubator way back in 2007, and we've had visionary leaders who set up the scientist entrepreneurship scheme also at NCL. You know, so in 2009 itself, it was possible for a scientist to actually spin off their ideas. And since our patents were at an early stage, licensing them was probably not an option, and it was converting this idea into a spin-off seemed the most appropriate and the suitable option at that point. So the conducive environment of having an incubation center in your own campus, having visionary leaders and mentors who can actually guide you in developing a deep tech startup, and excellent funding support from BIRAC. So biotechnology startups especially have a very long way to the market. So we set up in 2015, and today we are at clinical trial stage. So you can imagine it is a long journey, taking it through various steps and de-risking it along the way. But I think the funding and early stage funding at an idea stage from BIRAC was also a catalyst towards taking this forward. So I think that is how Serigen was set up, and that was the vision, that we use silk-based materials, convert it into unique products that solve challenging problems in healthcare, and we've been working towards that since.
Great, ma'am. Very interesting and inspiring journey, and I'm sure you will be challenging many problems. You will be solving many problems which are very challenging in the medical field. So this leads to our next question: how challenging this process is for a normal science student or for a scientist to convert a good idea into a deep tech startup. What kind of challenges associated with the lab to market journey for the science-based startup, basically? So I want to ask Manjusha ma'am, can you elaborate this process in little bit detail?
Yeah, sure. So you already heard from Anuya that how long is the process, even though she has this passion and vision since her engineering days, but I started at very late stage. So that realization came to me at very late stage. But as much as I understood about startups since past 1 year, since I incorporated Rechargen or so, I think that deep tech startups are most challenging ones. Can you hear me?
No, I think it's fine.
I can hear you, but okay.
Is it Anuya?
It's fine with that. Yeah, go ahead, Manjusha. Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying that I feel that deep tech startups are most challenging ones. So you see that a lot of digital platforms and apps are being developed, and a lot of companies are being formed around that. So I feel that developing such digital platforms or apps for convenience of day-to-day life is probably much easier than developing a technology solution that can solve major societal or environmental issue. Can you hear me now? Yes, Sarika? I'm audible, Anuya?
No, we can hear you, Manjusha. I got a call from Durga, so I picked it up. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I'd unmuted myself. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so well, I was telling you that probably developing apps or digital platforms that can make our day-to-day life more convenient is probably easier than developing a deep technology solution that can solve major societal or environmental issues and creating new markets as well. So I think deep tech startup is a bit slower and it is more expensive to get off the ground than a digital startup for several reasons, you know. So one of the reason is that it requires very strong research base because product development in deep tech startups depends on fundamental research, which requires a strong set of advanced skills, knowledge and infrastructure. And second, I think deep tech products are much more difficult to scale and it does require large investments, you know. So the infrastructure, the skills and the resources needed by deep tech startup require substantial funding capacity. Over that too over for extended period, very long period. It can be a long journey for normal science student to convert a good idea into a deep tech startup. It is of course not impossible and it is very interesting and challenging, but as I say, it's not easy as well. It can be very challenging in my opinion. And for your second part of your question about challenges associated with lab to market journey of science-based startups. So it does include the earlier points as well of having a strong research base and having funding over a long period of time. And including that, the fact that the technology risk and the complexity arise from the fact that deep tech startups often use technologies that are at low TRL level. Okay, so after proving a technology in lab condition, a startup still faces a long road in turning it into a demonstrated or tested solutions. So besides, we are scientists, you know, so at least I found it a bit difficult to understand market and business quickly. You know, it took me some time, and I don't think I still understood it properly. And another challenge which can be specific or maybe specific to our country is lack of confidence of investors or big corporates towards early stage deep tech startups that are coming out of Indian academic institutions. So all they want to invest in is growth companies. And when it comes to grants, which can help you in the first leg of your startup journey, so I found that at least for now, there is a plethora of funding for biotech-based startups. As Anuya has mentioned, BioRack has a very robust model to support these startups in the early stage of their development. But that is not true for startups working in the areas like clean energy. So there are not many funding avenues for clean energy based startups. But I think that is also changing slowly. And incubators like Tata Powerback, Social Alpha or DHIS, Technovos, they are funding startups that are developing solutions for clean energy or electric mobility. But as I said, still the avenues are lesser as compared to bio-based startups. So these are some of the challenges that I see for taking solutions from lab to market. Yeah.
Okay. So for the next question,
just as a heads up, there are only 20 minutes left. So if you could, you know, in the interest of time, be a bit quick with the questions and answers. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So we will try to do as fast as it is possible. So the next question is from Anuya ma'am. Do you think women-led, women co-founded or large women employees companies have an advantage over men-only companies? Do you find this edge?
Yeah, so let's leave the men-only companies outside for a while. But so if you look at some of the women-led startups or startups which have a large population of women employees, I'll just focus my discussion a little bit on that first. So there is a lot of research available to show that women-led companies are more profitable than men-only companies. Okay, so although the research is mostly from the Western countries, but in India also we have seen successful startups which have started in the garage, like Dr. Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, where she has taken Biocon. We have seen that, and there are others as well. Indra Nooyi, when she was leading, when she was the chairman of PepsiCo, the revenues of PepsiCo actually doubled, right? So recently there was an article in Forbes which talks about how profitable the women-led startups are, and their mass challenge, which is actually a US-based accelerator. So they did a research on about 350 startups, and they have shown that the return on investment is actually 2 times when you have a woman-led entrepreneur versus men-led company. Now, in spite of all these statistics, we still saw that in 2020 or 2021, like you showed, there is the only 2% of the total investment of $150 billion that went into the startups, only 2% of that was invested in women. And Forbes has come up with very interesting ideas about why women startups are more successful. And they attribute that to the culture that is developed in the startups. So women-led startups are more socially responsible. They are generally better on pay parity. They are generally better in terms of incentives and facilities like childcare. They are more inclusive. They are more, and therefore, because you have a diverse board that is sitting in terms of ethnicity, in terms of gender, you will basically see it as an enriching experience. So even employees actually prefer to work with such startup. So I definitely don't think that, if at all, if there is no advantage, there is definitely not a disadvantage of having a woman-led versus a men-only startup. And the way Cerigen has done, so we have not consciously employed only women, but somehow we have always been able to find a woman employee who is at par with a men employee who has been interviewed in Cerigen. And only recently, after 6 or 7 years, we've hired our first man employee. It was not a conscious decision, but I don't think Cerigen has in any way been in a disadvantaged situation because we had women employees dominating the work culture. So, yeah.
Thank you. Very nicely you brought the facts, and I am sure that many of future entrepreneur will will note down this point. So we will move to next question. To
one
you.
point.
Yes.
Yes. I think, and it's also one of the best times to be a woman-led startup because of the fact that there is a lot of avenues for funding which are only available to women founders, and there are a lot of business competitions, a lot of grants, a lot of this that restrict that unless you have a 50% stake which is owned by a woman in the company, you cannot even apply for this. So I think it's not no better time than now to be a woman founder.
Okay. And I think our next question is on the similar lines. Like, do you think that women entrepreneurs are efficiently overcoming the hindrance which they have faced in past in patriarchal society? And can you suggest some of the smart moves which young women entrepreneur can keep in mind when we are when they are dealing with such kind of situation where they face discrimination on certain basis or certain ground? So can you make a comment on that?
You want me to comment? Yeah. Okay. So I'll just keep it short because I've already addressed some of this in the earlier question. But basically, I think as let's talk about my experience in general. If you look at the patriarchal society and mainly where entrepreneurs face hindrances, it might be true a lot more in the grassroots innovators or in other sectors, but being a startup incubated at Venture Center, I don't think you have presented some of the statistics earlier that 50% of the women companies have women founders, or there are more than so many employees that are women. So when you're in Venture Center, you will never realize that you're doing something different, and there is no patriarchal society hindrances that you will actually come across. So when we moved out of Venture Center, we have had 1 or 2 experiences where we have, suddenly realized that there is a different or there is a bias that you actually experience. So the day we shifted out of Venture Center, we were actually unloading the truck from all the equipments, and they were being unloaded, and they were going to, shifting to our own facility. And that is when we had these workers who came, and when they wanted to talk to us, they said, "हमें आपसे बात नहीं करनी है, sir कहाँ है?" So sir से बात करनी है. So that kind of bias. And even or for example, one day when we were in the company over there in the industrial estate, there was a courier guy who comes, and I'm there to receive the courier, and he's like, "Sir से बात करनी है." I said, "क्या बात करनी है sir से?" So he says that I'm a courier company and I want to tie up with you to just pick up. So even for a trivial situation as this, they would want to talk to a sir rather than talk to a madam. So I think those kinds of instances are there, but they are not being hindrances. And I don't think there are any smart moves or any tactical solutions. It's just been that we have never limited ourselves, saying that we are women and this is something beyond our reach. So it is, you yourself breaking some of those barriers, or not, aligning with some of those stereotypes that are there. And that is what I would tell. I mean, it's all about how much you limit yourself. If you don't limit yourself, sky is the limit then. So be bold, be fierce.
So we will take one. Okay, so we will take one more question. I think it will be little bit longer question. So if we broadly categorize the women entrepreneurs in three categories: grassroots entrepreneur like unorganized, rural, suburban, low income group; mid-rung, driven by need to build a reputation, improve quality and creative instinct they have; and the upper crest, which are already resourceful, role model, and highly influential. So how do you see their role in society, and what are the major opportunities and challenges associated to ignite the process to mobilize more and more women entrepreneurs in each category, let's say? So I want to ask Manjusha ma'am, how do you see this?
Well, Vikash, frankly, I don't think I have been an entrepreneur for long enough to precisely comment on this. But if I look at it in more general way, even in education or research or in entrepreneurship, women are increasingly playing significant role. That's what we can see. I think that is because of social transformation or spread of higher education, awareness, urbanization, and family support. So all this is contributing to the emergence of women entrepreneurs in large numbers, which I believe is good for the society. For Anuya has mentioned that how naturally the work culture in women-led startups is different, and there is more pay parity, and work culture is more better, more a woman-friendly atmosphere is there. So I think it is good for society because, as they say, you educate a man and you educate an individual, but if you educate a woman, you educate a generation, right? So this can be applied for entrepreneurship also. I think the woman entrepreneur not only economically lifts her family, but she can inspire many other women to do so by setting an example. And all types of women entrepreneurs, as mentioned by you, can be envisioned in that kind of role. For example, the self-help groups or cooperative enterprises that are incorporated mostly by mid-rung women entrepreneurs to with a intention or with a vision to bring together rural, unorganized, grassroots level women entrepreneurs. These are prominent examples of successful and sustainable models for social entrepreneurship based on sisterhood and common sensibilities, I feel. And I think the upper class or highly influential women entrepreneurs, they can play a crucial role in developing entrepreneurial spirit among many young women. If those young women are exposed to the case studies or the profiles of such successful role models, we need role models also sometime to get inspired to do something. And there are several such role models in India as well. You have shown in your PPT in the starting itself, in terms of self-made women entrepreneurs who made it big in the business world on their own, and which is not inherited, but we do not know them, right? Now, because of Shark Tank India, we know Vinita Singer, we know Namita Thapar, or we know Ghazal Alak. But before that, have you heard about them? I don't think so that any one of you have heard about them. So we need such role models, and we, as much as we know the female political leaders, I think we don't know the business leaders. So it is really important. There should be effort to bring out storage of such role models on more visible or accessible platforms. That is the one thing. And for your question on how to mobilize more women in entrepreneurial roles, so I think it is important to have enough women in decision-making process at all levels of entrepreneurship ecosystem. Besides the avenues for professional training and then counseling and overall development of women entrepreneurs, that should be made available at multiple places for grassroots level women entrepreneurs. Right now, we see that such kind of avenues are concentrated mostly in metro cities. If you go to second tier cities or third tier cities, there is no such. They are all on their own. They learn from on their own experiences only. There is no formal training for them. Okay, so this is one thing that I feel. And another thing is that the financial institution should provide working capital assistance for both the small scale venture and large scale ventures led by women. So yeah, that's what I feel. Are you there, Vikash?
Vikash, we
Yes,
can't
yes,
hear
I
you.
am here. You can't
Yeah.
hear me? Can
Now
you hear
we
me
can.
now?
Now we can.
Okay. Sorry, extremely sorry. So we have a last question, which I want to ask. So this is in our Indian society, we mainly feel that the household responsibility is of women. Means it is generally accepted. It is our mindset, whether it is a woman or whether it is a man. So you have sometimes this guilt factor for not giving enough time to the family or something like that. So how do you see this to balance the personal life and the professional life? What are your suggestions for the people who are aspiring to make a career as a scientist or as an entrepreneur, and also want to balance their personal and professional life? So I think both of you can answer this question shortly. And if we can take any question further, then we will see from the audience.
So if I first, yeah. So I think balancing professional and personal life is something like you mentioned that in the Indian culture, especially, there is more focus on the woman. So one advice for aspiring and young students is that find the right partner when you get married. I think that is an extremely important decision.
Yes, I second that.
I think there cannot be any other decision that plays a major role in how you shape your professional career later. The support system that you have in terms of your husband and your in-laws, for me, it has been exceptional. And I don't think I could have achieved what I've done in my professional career if that was missing. So having said that, there are always, multiple tasks, both on the professional as well as the personal front. It is up to you to prioritize which ones are important. There are some that are not negotiable. There cannot be any compromise, and that is where you have to be full time. So like taking care of the child when the child is young or something like that requires your attention, and as a mother you would want to also do that. So but it's not important that you spend all 24 hours taking care of the child, but it's important to find the right daycare center where the child is again going to get a good enriching and constructive experience. So finding that right support system is what I do. It's same for the work as well. Like if it's writing a scientific manuscript, it is not negotiable. I will do that task myself because that is high priority. But there could be areas where I could seek help from some of my subordinates. So therefore, hiring the right team members, bringing in the right HR, is definitely, I generally work with people who are more independent, who are more motivated and passionate themselves, who want to achieve something in life. And then I don't mind investing some time in mentoring them to bring them to the quality of work or something that I work with. So I think that has been, and having planning your day, delegating your work. I think that is what helps. But nevertheless, you will still have bad days and you have to live with that. So I also prioritize my me time, which could be just an hour walk or listening to music, painting, or whatever it is that you need to do to remain sane in all the professional and personal situations.
We will go for the same question to Manjusha ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. So I completely agree with what Anuya has mentioned, each and every point, and I have my own experience on a similar lines, that I have extremely supportive partner and very supportive extended families, whether it's my parents or parents-in-laws, and they took care of my child since when he was very young, because my husband, when I joined NCL, my husband was in Madhya Pradesh, so my mother and my mother-in-law used to stay with me to take care of my child for several years. And not only parents, even my siblings who have their own busy careers, they are doctors, engineers and all, but still they also used to come and stay with my son, or they used to take him with them if I have to travel for work. So it is really, really important to have a strong support system in terms of family or friends, whatever. Without that, I would say it's not possible. So build that support system cautiously. Okay, avoid any smaller frictions if you have vision to make good in your professional life. Then don't hold a grudge for small things at home, especially when dealing with your parents-in-laws. That would I say to the nobody will love your child the way your parents-in-law or your parents would love. So that I never kept my child in crèche or in daycare center. So always my mother-in-law or my mother would stay with me. So that was a big relief, I would say, because I would work without worrying about him at all. So that is really important. And I also feel that if you are honest and passionate towards what you are doing, then you will find someone who at workplace also who believes in you when no one else does. So respect such people, grab the opportunities that come your way, but live in the present. Okay, it's okay momentarily to feel bad for not getting something that you desired or feel deserved to get professionally, but don't stay in that state for long. Let go of the things, everything falls in place eventually. Everything doesn't happen as per our wish, if we know that. So the point is that I personally feel that if you want to do well professionally, it is important that you are happy in your personal life also. So as Anuya mentioned, prioritizing the things is really important. And of course, the priorities can be different for different people, which is absolutely fine. So for me, my loved ones' happiness is always the priority than anything else. And of course, that includes the happiness of my students as well. So I guess that's how I balance my personal and professional life.
Thank you for enlightening us. So Anu ma'am, if we have some more time and we can take questions from the audience.
Maybe we have time for just one or two questions. Are there any questions in the chat box?
Right now, I cannot see. I can see one hand raise, I guess, from Kalpana Trimukhe. It is from very long. So,
sure. So why don't we go
to
a question?
Yeah. So Kalpana, can you unmute yourself and ask the question, whatever you want to say? Kalpana Trimukhe, can you hear us? Anyone else want to ask anything from the Manjusha ma'am or Anuya ma'am related to the today's panel discussion topic, women in entrepreneurial role? So if there is no question, so I would like to hand over the floor to you, back to you, ma'am, Anu ma'am.
Thank you, Vikash. Thanks, Anuya. Thanks, Manjusha, for this very wonderful discussion. What you said just made me think of some of the quotes of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was the second Supreme Court Justice in the US. And one of her quotes that always stuck to me is that women belong in all places where decisions are being made. And it shouldn't be that women are an exception. I thought that really hit me hard, because why are we even here today, right? Why do we have to commemorate a special day for women. And based on the last question that Vikash put forth, I remember another comment of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she said, women will have achieved true equality when men share with them the responsibility of bringing up the next generation. And if, you know, and I think whatever you said just merely reflects that particular thought. And for those who don't know Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I would strongly recommend that you guys go and take a look at what she has done, what she has written. She passed away a couple of years ago during COVID, but she's a really very, very strong personality, and you can learn a lot from her for sure. So with that, let's move on to the next agenda in our program today. I would like to invite Nandita Jairaj. Nandita, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, and I can see you too. Hi. So I'd like to invite Nandita Jairaj to give her talk on lab hopping to report realities of Indian women in STEM. For those who don't know Nandita Jairaj is an independent science journalist, an editor, a storyteller who's interested in the contributions and journeys of the underrepresented groups in science, not just women. She's the co-founder of the award-winning feminist science media platform, thelifeofscience.com, and an author of several children's books. Her latest is Ratna and the Ring of Fire, and 31 Fantastic Adventures in Science. So she's a big science enthusiast. She's previously worked with The Hindu and the Brainwave magazine. And in today's talk, she's going to focus on what it has been like for women to participate in science through the years. She will look at a few cases from the past and trace some of the stories to modern experiences of women in science and tell us whether something has really changed or not. With that, I would like to hand over the floor to Nandita. Nandita, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Anuradha. I just wanted to check, I will be sharing my screen, but from another account. So I just want to test if that's working.
Yeah, would you like to test that out? Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thanks first of all to everyone at NCL, Anuradha, and also I think Sarika and Durba who have been corresponding with. Thanks for inviting me. And
Nandita, would you be able to put this on full screen or something like that? I realize it's a PDF, but if you could put it in a slideshow mode.
Yeah, better?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. So yeah, so I mean, I'm glad to be on this platform, and also I got to listen to a little bit of the previous sessions, not the whole thing, but it was really nice to hear from entrepreneurs at NCL about their journey and their learnings along the way. So I think as Anuradha introduced, my name is Nandita Jairaj. I'm a science journalist today, but I did also come out of the science ecosystem. So I mean, I chose to write about and to report on science rather than to do research itself. And I think today we've come to a point where this is also part of the scientific ecosystem. So I do consider myself part of it and not really an outsider. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about what I've been doing with this project that I co-founded along with Ashima Dogra, and today has become a collective which where we have a few more team members, Shayantan and Aishwarya, and a very, very vast network of science media makers, freelancers who we work with to do our work. So, I mean, if you are interested in what we do, our website has everything that we do. It's called thelifeofscience.com. you can check it out there. And I think after you've listened to what I have to say, I hope that you will be curious enough to go and see some of what we've done. So I was actually asked, I think initially by Sarika, to talk about participation of Indian women in science, and that's a very wide topic. So I'll try to do justice to some of the aspects of it that I have some experience covering. To do a brief introduction about the lifeofscience.com, maybe some of you know of it, but for the rest of you, what we do is we report on and we investigate realities of Indian women, transgender, and non-binary persons in STEM. So we do have this gender lens that we apply when we're writing about science and scientific conditions in India. And we publish all of these reports, whatever we find out, in various multimedia formats. So apart from text, there's art, photos, audio, video, and also a few on-ground events and talks like this one. Most of our work is based on in-depth and, of course, until COVID, in-person interviews. And that's why we dubbed ourselves lab hopping, because what we were doing was hopping across laboratories in India to find out more about the science being done in our country. And over the years, because of all of our collaborations, we've also developed this network of young media makers, artists, podcasters, all kinds of multimedia makers who are interested into stepping into the SciComm territory. And we produced some really memorable work thanks to these collaborations. We've also published a couple of books. One has already been published by Ashima, and I wrote it. It's called 31 Fantastic Adventures in Science, and it is about, it tells the stories of a few contemporary women in science in India and what their work is about. It's targeted at younger audiences, like maybe a 10 to 12 plus age group, though it's very much, we've heard that adults have enjoyed it just as much. We're also working on another book, and besides that, Ashima, myself, and Shantan have also written children's picture books, which are themed on the topic of women in science and different stories that we have uncovered during our journalistic work. There's also some snapshots here of some of the articles that they've published in the past few months, what kind of topics we report on, all of that. You can of course read them in detail on our website. There's one initiative that I wanted to touch on that which is called hashtag 365 Indian Women in STEM. So this is something that we started, this is something that we did in 2021, the last year, where every day of the year we highlighted one Indian woman in science. And we did this throughout the year. And the motive really was just to demonstrate how easy it can be to find out women experts in various fields of STEM in the country, and sort of as a counter to the notion that there aren't enough women in science for us to expect more visibility on, whether it's on panels or conferences or all of these places where important things happen in the STEM world. And I will just I want to move on now to some of our findings. I'm sorry that I have to remove the full screen, but hopefully you can still see, because I needed to look at another window. So the important part of what we do is, because we've interviewed so many people, hundreds of people, and in-depth interviews, and kept track with their careers over the 6 years that we've been doing this. We have detected quite a few patterns and quite a few observations that require a little more deeper look at, and which could give us some clues about why we have the gender gap and a caste gap and a class gap and geographical, so many different types of inequities that exist in science today. The one I think somewhat accepted explanation for a gender gap is the lack of early opportunities, mentorship, and motivation. So even today, only 65% of our women and girls are literate compared to 80% of men. So right at the get-go, we have this sort of a gap. And we still have millions of girls every year who are dropping out of school due to reasons like lack of sanitation facilities. So that is the kind of very basic level that we're starting off with. Yet there is, yet we have a situation where 40% of our PhDs are still women. So even though this problem is there, it is not the main area of attrition of women in science if you look at it more broadly. And the other reason for the gender gap that again everybody loves to talk about and is more accepted is societal expectations from women. Women, whether they're in science or outside of it, are still subjected to the same kind of expectations, like get married at a certain age and have children by a certain age, and this naturally clashes with professional growth, especially in science. And many women do seem to drop out because of these kind of reasons, and often it comes across as a choice, like they chose to drop out because they wanted to take care of their children. But really, what we learned is that instead of saying that we can't help it, we have to ask, why is it that our young women are not seeing science as a space where motherhood can be accommodated? So why are they seeing that if I want to take care of my children, I will need to drop out of science? So that is a question we need to ask, instead of being comfortable with the reason that it was her choice, so we can't help it. Similarly, we also came across many stories where women faced bias during hiring, whether it was as a PhD student or as a faculty. When it was a problem if they were married, because they were assumed that then they would probably soon have children. It was a problem if they already had children, because then it was assumed that they would not be able to give science the kind of commitment it needed. There was sometimes a problem if they were unmarried, because then it was assumed that she will probably get married in a couple of years, so it would be a risk to hire her. So, like that, sometimes there really does seem to be no way out of facing such biases. And as much and because these kind of explanations are never on paper, we never have proof that these mindsets exist. But it's only when women who are on these hiring committee themselves, and sometimes men also, who tell us that they have witnessed these kind of comments being made by the HOD or by higher ups, who take the ultimate decision, that we know that this level of discrimination is happening. And then I think one for the next problem for women is, say they have entered science, but now they need to progress in science, right? And for that, it becomes really hard when there is a lot of everyday sexism that you have to face. I think I think it was I forgot the previous speaker's name. I'm sorry, it was either Manjusha or Anuya. I think one of them spoke about the very sort of interactions that you may have, where somebody comes and asks for sir, or assumes that the boss is a man and shows some hesitance talking to women. And I think it's such a situation where you can't make such a big deal out of it. Often women laugh it off and sort of move on, because you can't possibly sit and get affected by every small act of everyday sexism. But also when it happens repeatedly, and there are very different ways where this happens, it does take a toll on the psyche of especially young women in science who are already, who may start doubting their abilities, and there is a term for this called imposter syndrome, which is a very serious problem even among senior women in science, but of course more so among younger, more uh, people in science. So it's become quite normalized. We have heard for women to hear sexist comments on irrelevant things like what she's wearing or the personal going on in her life, and successful and women in science who are fairly serious are able to take these in their stride. But the question is, should they have to? Uh, should we be spending energy on teaching our young women in science to put up with this, or is it better to put that energy into teaching the rest of the science ecosystem to not put women through this kind of everyday sexism? And is it really fair that women who don't have the patience for, or maybe have a less tolerance level for this kind of everyday sexism, is it fair that they end up being driven out of these spaces because they're too sensitive or whatever it is? So it's really, we have to ask whether whether we are okay with these kind of scenarios. And I've also heard personally of many scientist friends that I've made over the years of cases where they are put in less, scientific committees or given these very household type tasks rather than the more impact, the more the more opportunities to be noticed are less for some of these tasks that they're given. And of course, the other side of this is because as with increasing consciousness of this whole women in science as an issue, there is the issue of the token woman, where there might be two women in a department and they are forced to be on a lot of committees because now there is this consciousness that we need to have a woman, at least one woman on it. So that's another kind of burden that is happening these days. I also want to talk about trans people. When I say women, I mean anybody who identifies as a woman, including cis women who dominate, and also there are trans women, that people who are not who identify as a woman but were not biologically were not born as a woman, at least born as a female sex. So trans people also exist very much in science. We believe that they don't. We believe that they don't, and they're the numbers are so less that it's not worth worrying about. But this is a absolutely wrong attitude to take, because this is the same mistake we made with women on a whole. In till the mid 20th century, there were hardly any women, and there was not enough demand, or there was not enough push for creating conditions that were suitable for more women to join. And we're making the same mistake now with trans people. So we really need to start from a place of inclusivity and not wait for one issue to be sorted out before we go to the next issue, or else we're going to end up taking 500 years for equality, and I don't think that's what we want. And so for trans people, it's a matter of suppressing their very identity for a chance at being treated well and for continuing their work. Their only option is to suppress their actual gender, and this is not easy. And we've heard from various studies that some of my team members have conducted that this creates a huge toll on mental health. And already science being such a stressful field, it does not bode well for people who are transgender to continue in such a field. The same, the same also draw the same parallel for people from marginalized castes. So for them also the kind of everyday battles they face are real big detriments to them being able to compete with those of us who have certain privileges. And then there is also the matter of sexual harassment, which I hope the person speaking after me, Anand Grover, will be getting into in more detail. But I do want to confirm that sexual harassment we have found is just as frequent in science as it is in any other spaces. But the problem with it happening in science is because in our country we have this respect for scientists, which is almost bordering on like worshipping them. So it becomes even more unthinkable to accuse these people who are supposed to be like the most objective people of such human um, uh, of such human crimes. It becomes even more unthinkable, and it gives them even more impunity because everyone is worried about the loss of reputation more than the damage that is being done to survivors. The problem becomes compounded because of the power dynamics that exist in how science takes place in not just our country, most of the world. The PI student relationship has a lot of imbalanced power struggles. So really, it's hard for the problem of sexual harassment to be dealt with in a decent way. Then finally, what we have seen that is an obstacle for women to reach these visible spheres in science to win the awards and all of that is that most science spaces in India are still gender segregated. So it ends up that women in science don't have as many powerful friends as the men in science. So it is these old boys clubs, as they call it, where a lot of these decisions are made. Who gets big big stakes opportunities and who gets the chance to represent the institute at a conference. Those kind of decisions end up being made in informal gatherings where often women are excluded from. And this manifests in the form of conference organizers saying that we had no women speakers because there are not enough experts in this area, or the two people we invited could not attend, or and then we see juries who have been unable to nominate any women for awards. For example, the most recent Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award had 0 women awardees out of 11 winners across various fields: physics, biology, chemistry, environmental science, engineering, mathematics. All of these fields, there were multiple people who won awards, and not one of them was a woman. Not even in the biological sciences, which is thought to be women friendly. And we have to remember that the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award is awarded for the people below the age of 45. So we're not even talking, we can't even say that, it will get better because these are still relatively young scientists, and the gap is not so much to justify 0%. And another big wake-up call for us doing this work was to realize that not all women are affected equally by the same problems, just like not all men are unaffected by some of these issues, and there are various margins of various axes of marginalizations that affect women. So very often for a Dalit or a Bahujan or Adivasi woman in science, the kinds of obstructions they face is completely different from a woman in science who may have been brought up in an upper class Brahmin family. So we realized that it was a mistake to homogenize this entity called women in science and consider that all of us have the same kind of problems. That is a big mistake, which unfortunately is happening actively now. Even though women in science has become a buzzword, there is not enough talk about who we mean when we say women in science. And there's a lot of exploration of that we are trying to do with our work. I also want to talk about some apparently neutral problems in science, where you would hear about it and immediately think, okay, but that's not a gender problem, so why are you talking about it? For example, problems like delayed funding. There's one big problem that is there in Indian science is the problem where, of course, overall funding for scientific research is extremely less. But even for those who get this funding, the money often reaches months, and we've heard many cases of years of delay in receiving the funds. So this might seem like it's not a gender related problem, but if you start thinking about who is affected more by this problem, it is obviously people with less resources, people with less backup options and less support, which often are women, and often are students coming from socioeconomic difficulty, that kind of background. They can't afford to do science if they don't receive their fellowships on time. So we have to look at, these kind of sociological lenses when we're talking even about these apparently neutral problems, and then we can identify that they're not as neutral as it seems. Similarly, even the scientific culture of long hours of being expected to work weekends and being expected to work odd times is something that all scientists are expected to do, whether you're male or female or whatever. But who, how many women can afford to do these long hours of work? How many of them don't have other responsibilities that keep them from the sort of single-minded focus on science? The number of women who can do that are very less, and not everybody has the kind of immense support from their families. So these are just some examples of what, how we've learned to look at issues and how we've learned to report on issues. And I think that's why people are seeing value in the work that we're doing, and that's why we receive so many emails. Unfortunately, we can't attend to every one of them, but so many emails where people tell us what they're going through and how the kinds of problems that they're facing. And that's how we know of everything that I'm telling you is based on what I've heard or what we've reported on. So just to now spend maybe a few minutes on, because I promised you on going back in time also, and I think there is value in doing that. Though in our work we talk about contemporary scientists. We also have read quite a bit about women scientists of the past to make sense of what is happening today, and just to sometimes remind ourselves that we are in a better place today, but then also not get too complacent, because very quickly we realize that it's not, change is not coming organically. Change is not just happening organically and automatically, and change is happening really slow, in fact. So just like three examples I thought I could leave you with, maybe you would find it interesting, is, of course, we all know about Marie Curie, and we know, and it's like a childhood legend. Everybody's told about how brilliant she was, and how she and her husband told us everything we know about radioactivity. And of course, the most romantic part of the story is how they literally sacrificed themselves for their science. They died because of their own research. They did not know at the time that radioactivity was so bad for the body. So these are all like elements of a feel good story for science, a role model that we want to tell our children, and we hope that they're inspired by. But we must also remember that Marie Curie's life really was not pretty at all. And I don't know if this is the kind of life and these are the kind of battles we still demand our young women to fight, because it's simply inhuman to expect anyone to fight the amount that Marie Curie did. very few of us might know that she grew up with a lot of trauma. There was a lot of death in her family and a lot of poverty. And of course, at the time, there was not a lot of options for women in science to study, to do their higher studies. So she and her she and her sister had to attend these underground universities, which was the only way at the time that women like her could study science. So they had to do these illegal things. They had to face a lot of sexism and xenophobia. I mean, if you're interested in knowing more, I've written an article about this that I can share later. But Marie Curie was, you know, among the many problems that she faced, is one thing that not many of us know is that the first Nobel Prize in 1903 that she won with her husband and with Henry Becquerel, she was originally not nominated for it. She almost missed it, and it's only because one of the committee members happened to be a women's rights advocate that they said that we cannot ignore Marie Curie's contributions in this, that she was nominated and eventually won. So her second Nobel Prize was after Pierre Curie, her husband, died in an accident, and it was quite a few years after that. And Marie Curie was in a relationship with another scientist who happened to be married. She wasn't married herself, of course, she was a widow, but she faced so much of flack, so much of mudslinging, and she was accused of being what do you call it, like a family breaker and all of that. So much that she was disinvited from the Nobel ceremony of her second Nobel Prize, because it was said that the king who would award the Nobel Prizes could not be shaking hands with an adulteress. So, to which she had some very strong words as well. But I'm just bringing these up to say that when we glorify Marie Curie, we should also be aware that we're not asking, we're not putting the onus on women to be fighting the kind of extreme battles that she did, and instead we should demand that society does better. And I think it's very unrealistic for anybody to go through and come out of the kind of difficulties that she did. So it's high time that we expect better from. We don't expect our women to keep tolerating more and more, but instead expect better from society. Another quick example, of course, I think by now those of us who engage with women in science topics will know the story of Kamala Shoni and how she had to sit and protest outside C.V. Raman at the Indian Institute of Science, because C.V. Raman objected to having women in the institute. He was the director at the time, I believe. So we hear about the story a lot, especially during special days in March and February. We hear about the story and everybody celebrates it. But it's kind of like an empty celebration unless we come back to our own lives and ask ourselves, how often do we encourage the protesters in our own universities, in our own institutes, who are fighting for things like maybe hostel curfews for girls, or various different kinds of discrimination that they may be facing. So we hear of these protests, these controversies that students lead, but there's very, very little support from the science community, whereas everybody is happy to support an example from the past. So we need to really remember that the progress that has been made has been due to these revolutionary acts, which were controversial, sometimes illegal at the time, and we need to be more. We need to challenge ourselves to support the same acts while they're happening today. And also, we need to remember that Kamala Shoni, herself actually was from a very privileged and educated family. Her own father and uncle were also educated in IISc, and it took someone like her to protest outside C.V. Raman for him to finally start letting women in. So we don't know for sure how many other women may have demanded that they be let in, but C.V. Raman may not have been motivated to to change his policy. I'll end now with a more contemporary example of Jocelyn Bernell. She's an astrophysicist who discovered pulsars, which are these objects in the universe, and really changed the way that we understand our universe. And the interesting thing about Jocelyn Bernell, besides all of her very important work, is that her discovery of pulsars won the Nobel in 1974, but she was not one of the winners. And there's been a lot of talk about why this was, and a lot of outrage about how this could be. But there's this quote that is attributed to her, which I'm very fond of, where she said, "I myself am not upset about it. After all, I'm in very good company, am I not?" This is the kind of quote which requires you to just think about, she says what she's actually saying between the words. And it's very loaded, sort of powerful statement that she made, this powerful kind of suggestion, insinuation that she's making with this sentence. And the other reason, Jocelyn Bernell is so inspiring is that eventually in 2018, she won the Breakthrough Prize for Physics, which is monetarily, I believe, a bigger prize than the Nobel Prize, above £2 million. And she used this money to establish a scholarship fund for minority students in science. So just to conclude, I just want to say at the lifeofscience.com, we have uncovered some of the most empowering stories of science from those who dare to complain, or those who refuse to follow the path that society and the system have set for them. We, on this Women's Day, I hope that we can find it within ourselves to celebrate the fighting spirit of our scientists and not stifle them. And I'm not just talking about the award winners. These scientists may be in colleges teaching hundreds of students a year with very, very few resources and very low salaries. They might be doing research in the summers just to keep their research dreams alive. They might be working in NGOs trying to use science to create impact. They may be lab technicians doing the grunt work behind many of our big discoveries. So once we start opening our eyes into seeing these contributions, to recognizing all of this as science as well, we will realize that our country has all the assets that we could possibly need. It's not that we need to make women smarter, or we need to make women better at networking. We don't need to improve women at all. They're doing great. So I think basically our reportage has shown that the science community, the independent media, and the government need to meet each other midway if we are to do justice to every young and old person in science in India who wants to do science for the good of the country on a whole. So I think that we need to welcome these difficult questions. Thank you. That's the end of my talk, and I just want to say I haven't mentioned any names and specific people when I talk about all of these observations that I've discussed, but they're all based on real interviews with real people, which are all on our website, thelifeofscience.com. So I would urge you to go and browse some of it, and also, if you can, support our work, because we're independent, and that's the only way we can. Thank you so much. Thanks, Anuradha. I'd love to take any questions.
Thank you, Nandita, for this wonderful talk. And it really brought out some of those intersectionalities that you talked about. When you talk to women scientists, they say that they have not been discriminated against. And that's probably because not all women have been affected equally. And a lot of men do not want to participate in this conversation because they probably have been impacted in some way or the other. And if we lose out or leave out any of these people, we are going to leave out quite a good percentage of our workforce, of the ideas, of the contributions that these people can give. So it was really nice how you brought out how we need to look at all these things through a sociological lens. So I would like to open the floor to questions. Please either post your questions on the chat, or raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and ask a question. I see Dr. Sarika Bhattacharya has her hand up. Sarika, would you like to ask your question, please?
Hi, Nandita. Thanks for accepting our invitation and coming and speaking here. I had a few things. One thing is, recently I was listening to another such meeting, and then there was this concept brought up about how we need to hire more women definitely to end this gender bias, but along with that, probably we need to hire men or have men who are more of allies, and how do we make sure that we hire men who understand the problem of women, because usually if you're hiring someone who is a high performer, many a times that person has a full support at home and does not have a spouse maybe who is who needs the man does not need to contribute enough at home, and that's the reason does not understand the problem problem that a woman can have when managing both home and work. So probably we should also focus on how we can bring more men along with women to support this movement and not only depend on women. That was one point I was trying to say. Another thing you mentioned about you find women mostly from maybe upper class. You mentioned, I think, Brahmins and such things. So how heterogeneous is the problem? Because since the problem is more a social structure which creates this problem, and the social structure is kind of almost similar across our different status, like upper, lower, middle class thing. So how much different heterogeneous is the problem versus what are the commonalities between all these women versus what are the differences? So you can elaborate that point also a little. And did I make us did you follow what I tried to?
I think so. Sarika. I'll give you my 2 cents. Of course, I don't have the solutions, but about the men, also involving men in this is, I completely agree with. I don't know necessarily if we need to look at hiring more men who are allies, because it's really hard to, through an interview or through whatever mechanism to identify genuine allies. I think more fruitful would be if we try to sensitize the men who already exist in our system, because what is happening is in this increasingly politically correct world and with social media, and people are quickly learning the keywords, the right things to say. So and that is also a little biased in that people who study in places or maybe have education abroad learn how to come off as an ally and say the right things, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are free of these biases. So if we start trying to filter out people on how politically correct their language is, I think that might end up being another exclusionary measure. So I think a better thing would be to sensitize all the staff. In fact, not only men, also women. Women need as much sensitization as men do often. So working with what we have, I think, is always a better thing to do. And second one about how heterogeneous, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking how common are the problems between people from different classes and castes. So I think that it's very, very varied. Like, it could be that an upper caste, I mean, the variation could be so wide that sometimes an upper caste woman might have had a more common journey with an upper caste man than a lower caste woman. So it's really like we cannot I mean, I think I'm not saying that there's nothing in common. Of course, there are things in common, but I'm saying that once we start looking at these intersectionalities, we see that it's it's impossible to it doesn't mean anything, you know. Even things like, I was just reading an article today on things like maternity benefits, right? Maybe a lot of people say that India is lucky because I think we are one of the countries with the most number of weeks of paid leave, maternity leave. But but that is only for the organized sector. So if we look at the majority of women who work in the unorganized sector, who are also from marginalized castes, most of them are from marginalized castes in the unorganized sector. How many of them get unorganized leave? So this whole dialogue of maternity leave doesn't even apply to them. So I think there is a need to address all of, and to look at the science community as a whole and not look only at PIs, to look at students, because the composition there is a lot more heterogeneous than the PIs. When I say most of the people we met were Brahmins, that is the PIs. But when we started opening up to students, when we started talking to technicians and people working in various levels in scientific institutions, immediately the pool became a lot more heterogeneous. So then we start realizing the plurality of issues that affect women in science. Thank you.
Thanks, Nandita. Now I have a question from my colleague, Dr. Durva Sengupta. I'm going to.
Hi. So I'm Durva. I'm just here sitting with Anu, although the name says Anu. So Nandita, great talk. My question is that, you know, your job is as a journalist to tell these stories, right? But how do we diversify the audience for these stories? Because I have the feeling that sometimes we are talking in some kind of an echo chamber. And, you know, I really loved your hashtag 365 women in Indian STEM, and I love your calendar idea, but I still think that, you know, how do you think we can really diversify the audience into students so that next time they picture a scientist, they have a woman scientist, next time they ask on Kaun Banega Crorepati about a scientist, it may be a woman, and so on and so forth, right? Or other diverse communities. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Durba. It's something that we keep, you know, it keeps confronting us as well as journalists. So one thing that we try to do is that we try to write our stories, and we, because we sort of in between science and journalism, our stories are read not just by the science community. So that's one thing that one advantage that we do have. So we try to publish, we try to cross-publish and engage with media houses, with, you know, regular news media houses as well. So the word gets out there. But I do think that the biggest change can come if, you know, if there is a bit more engagement from the government side, because government initiatives, the kind of reach they have is a whole other level, you know, the kinds of access they have in these India science festivals that they organize, or the science congress even, where there are thousands. Of course, the quality is debatable and there's a lot of controversy about that, but I mean, it's in front of our faces, that participation and the diversity of the kinds of schools that end up going there and the kinds of colleges. Often nothing compete, you know, even our most elite and high quality of science conferences cannot compete with the kind of reach that some of these events have. So I mean, I feel like if, you know, if we received a bit more of, if we were involved, there is a lot of parallel conversations taking place. You know, the government has a lot of money apparently going to women in science initiatives, but that is completely kept separate from the work that we do, and we keep trying to intersect, but I don't know why this doesn't happen. So that is a loss. I feel like if we all put our hands together, and, you know, if there's a lot more crosstalk in the kinds of science communication that's happening in the country, that you know, that would work with, you know, regional media, for example. It could, you know, these dialogues could get out of this echo chamber that that social media, I mean, I think social media is the biggest culprit here. You know, a lot of our visibility and reactions we get are on social media, but you're right, it's very much an echo chamber. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's just I don't know the answer yet, but it's a question that I think every few months all of us should keep coming back to and reminding ourselves that you see so much agreement. It sounds like everyone in India agrees with everything. Then why do we have a problem? But it's because we're only seeing this tiny subset of people who are on these platforms.
So thanks. And if I may squeeze in another question.
Sure.
Is that, we talk a lot about anecdotes, right? But a lot of anecdotes does not make statistics. And, do have statistics as well, but then you wonder how well thought out the questioners were they, I think there's a lack, and I'm now going to put my neck on the block and say there's a lack of professionalism in developing some of these. Many of them are band-aid solutions, as you said, either from the government or from other sectors. We do what we can at the moment, right? On discussing these questionnaires, how do you even make good questionnaire? How do you decide that the data that you're getting out is really representative and so on and so forth? Do you have some comments on that?
I mean, not really, because I'm not a social scientist, and we've never, I mean, the reason that we've never gone into, we have, done a few surveys and stuff, but the sample size has always been less than, I mean, it's something that you need training for, to understand data and to interpret data. So I think that we, being journalists, are what we are the gap that we are trying to fill is just get a lot of in-depth stories out there. And we do hope that, and we have received, there are some social scientists who we know are taking note of our work, and maybe it's helping them do their work also. But I think they would be the best ones to answer on what is missing. But I do think that there has been some very high impact and high quality studies on women in science that have happened over the past couple of decades. Unfortunately, the reach has not been there, and there's not been very effective communication of these studies. I mean, it's all lying there in these random databases. You can find them online, but I mean, we see that in the early 2000s, the DST had engaged with social scientists in this Mumbai University to come out with the study, and all these recommendations, and incredibly nuanced, and everything they're saying really are all there. So it's not even like, people, after we give these talks, often people say, okay, but all the problems we get, but what are the action points? What do we do? But they're all there, and they've been there for decades, and somehow it's just not being implemented. So while there is a gap between data and anecdotes, I do feel that what we have, we can already do a lot more with what we have. And then, of course, we should keep improving our methodologies and all of that.
Sure, thanks. And I pass it back to Anu.
There seem to be a few hands up. Archana, followed by Nandini Devi. So Archana, can you go ahead and ask your question, please?
So hi everyone. So I have recently actually I saw advertisement for the faculty position, and so there was a age relaxation for the women, and that was specifically mentioned when you are having some trouble in your marriage, or if you are widow or something, you are getting the age relaxation. So I was very much surprised, like how we are deciding this. If you consider the women career, so everyone is having a family priority at some stage for few years. So don't you think that we should have a general relaxation rule for the women? And maybe we are asking more, we are asking favor from others, but at the same time, if you are giving favor, why only to this already you tag women that you are troubled, and now you are getting the favor, age relaxation for faculty position or something. So that was like a bit disturbing for me. Like, why we are getting this kind of relaxation. So anyone, if you have opinion, should we have a uniform rule for this, or should we really ask for the relaxation for everyone, or
Yeah, I'm as stumped as you are, Archana. I don't know on what basis, and it seems very arbitrary, these reasons that they've given. Like, I don't know if it's based on one or two instances that they saw. But I mean, I think the fundamental problem here is that none of us know who is deciding this. And none of us, there seems to be no dialogue that these decision makers have had with scientists like you. Or, I feel like even if there were 5 women scientists they consulted with, somebody would have brought up this issue that you are saying. And we don't know what is the mechanism now. If we want to contest this, how many of us, what do we do? Like, how, if I want to ask the question, this I want to ask. So we need, I think, a lot of preventive transparency on how these decisions are being made, and also if we ensure that these decisions are being made by diverse enough committees, or we know who to address if there are any disagreements. So yeah, I mean, I don't know enough. I agree with you. Right now, it sounds to me like I think that everyone should have this. There's no way that we can identify only women who've gone through this problem and this problem and this problem can avail this age relaxation. I think a much more efficient way would be just to say all women, since there is no better way at this point to determine who deserves it.
We'll move on to the next question in interest of time. Nandini, could you ask a question, please?
Yeah. Hi, Nandita. Whenever Ranu was saying Nandita, I was kind of like getting thinking that she's calling out my name. But anyway, yeah. My question is that there are a lot of policies. I think 12 years back, I attended a women's empowerment meeting in Delhi, and there were a lot of policies which were suggested, like even some of our women-oriented fellowships, or this leaky pot issue and all that. So do you have any idea about the impact of those policies? So if we study what policies are in place now and their impact, and then what's the consequence of all those things, and maybe we will be able to kind of like, I mean, you correctly said that, with whatever assets we have, we should be able to do much better. But maybe if we know what is the impact of those policies, maybe we will be able to suggest better policies. So is there any study of that sort, or what more can be done?
So one of these is the Women in Science scheme, which attempts to bring back women who had to drop out due to various reasons back into science. So it is, it has great intentions, and it has it had thousands of beneficiaries over the years. But this is just one problem, one example I'm showing you, because we've covered this issue. But we find that most of the women who receive these fellowships or whatever are not receiving their money in time. That is the that is one big issue. So many of them are being forced to, they're not able to do the research that they were promised in the time because they don't receive the money in time. And the other thing is, majority of the women, they have to drop out. They're given this money for 3 years, but after 3 years, there are no jobs for them because of whether it's age limits or just the lack of jobs. Most of them end up without a job. So all this scheme has done is give them like a 3 years, kind of like a small cookie, and then it's even more demotivating for most of them. It's not even like 25% of them gets jobs. The number of people who get research jobs is very, very less after these schemes. So while there are schemes, there is not enough there's not enough studying. How good are the beneficiaries doing? I don't know if they're tracking, if they're taking feedback or making any changes, because that's not what they're hearing and that's not what they're seeing. And again, this problem of transparency, we don't know. This data is not put out there by the government. So even as journalists, it's hard for us to report on. Anecdotal evidence is all that we have to go by because we don't have the numbers. So I think this is an important question you're asking, because we see schemes and fellowships being announced every Women's Day, every Science Day, but we need to follow up and find out how well these are doing, and yeah, if they're actually working out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nandita and Nandini. If there are no more questions, let's thank Nandita. And before we end, I just want to say you once again reminded me of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote that real change, enduring change happens only one step at a time. So, you know, despite the fact that we see such a slow progress, I think it is these small drops that will finally make up that ocean. So thank you so much, Nandita, for your wonderful thoughts and stories. And we look forward to reading more and more of them with time, and also look at your tweets.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to the next agenda on our program today. And this is a talk by Advocate Anand Grover. So while we are waiting to see Anand Grover, let me introduce Anand Grover, who is a founding member of the Lawyers Collective. He is a designated senior advocate, as I just mentioned. He practices in the Supreme Court of India, and he has offices in Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. He was the UN Special Rapporteur on the right of everyone to enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, that is essentially right to health, by the UN Human Rights Council from 2008 August to July 2014. He's currently an acting member of the Global Commission on Drug Policy. Grover has led the Lawyers Collective court case against Novartis regarding an interpretation of agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, which would determine the patent status of an antiretroviral drug in India. The result of the case was that certain drugs became ineligible for patenting, thus keeping the price of medications in line with generic medication costs. He represented the Cancer Patients Aid Association as an attorney and won a legal fight against the drug maker Novartis on this issue of patent of the cancer drug Glyvec. He represented Shreya Tripathi in her successful efforts to obtain bedaquiline for the treatment of her extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis. He has thus argued many cases related to public interest and human rights laws, like the mass eviction cases, environmental cases, and also LGBT rights. Today, Anand Grover's talk would be more pedagogical, and he will talk about sexual harassment at workplaces. With that, I'd like to pass on the floor to Anand Grover. Anand, please, the floor is yours.
I hope you can see me, but I can't see myself.
We still can't see you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure for me to be able to talk to scientists, because I think they are not driven ordinarily by ideologies, though we have seen in the COVID scenario, and there's an article recently written by a friend of mine in The Wire where she says that the COVID response has been driven partly by ideological considerations. But I'm sure that most scientists are not driven by that. So we are talking about gender equality practices in India, and talk about sexual harassment. Well, I think sexual harassment in the workplace is something which is dictated and molded by what happens in the home and in school. The acculturation practices in India, which actually drive what happens in the public spaces, are very important. So, for example, how do boys and girls conduct themselves in the early years of childhood is very important for how they behave as adults. So unfortunately, in India and elsewhere, boys are made to conduct and behave themselves in a particular manner and girls in a different manner. You know, the way that parents bring up their children then becomes very important, how they conduct themselves in adult life. Same thing in terms of schools. how teachers behave with children, both girls and boys, is very important and determines what happens as they become adults. Unfortunately, the scenario in this country is not a happy one for equality. A recent survey done by Pew found that 87% of the men agreed, and look at this, the wife must always obey her husband. And unfortunately, even 61% of the Indian women expressed total agreement with this sentiment. Why should they always obey? Even if the man is wrong, should they actually say, no, I don't want to agree? And that's part of human nature to disagree. To disagree is healthy, but that's not how acculturation takes place. Now, although 80% of the men in the same survey said gender equality is very important, but they said also that when jobs are in short supply, men deserve a greater right to employment than women. So where is the equality? A lot of people, about 40% of the persons surveyed in the Pew survey actually felt that sex-selective abortion is okay, it's acceptable, though it is illegal and criminal. So actually aborting a female child for 40% of the population in India, if you extrapolate the survey, is okay. That doesn't tell you a very good story about equality between men and women. Because of that also, India in the recent Global Gender Gap Report conducted by the World Economic Forum, only in 2021, found that India has actually slipped 28 places and become 140th, even lower than countries like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, amongst 156 countries. So things are not all too good. Now, what about the law? And I want to just give you a lowdown on the law internationally and nationally so that you become at least familiar with sexual harassment law. It begins with India becoming a signatory to the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, as it is popularly known. CEDAW mandates that states parties are obliged to actually have equality for and non-discrimination against women in all fields, and they detail out all fields in all of the articles, including having provisions in the Constitution like we have, laws, that is statutes, in the fields of development, customary or social or cultural practices, in education, in employment, like in scientific institutions, healthcare, participation and representation in government, nationally and internationally, ownership and administration of properties, even in family relations, and in all spheres in urban and rural areas. India did ratify CEDAW, except it had what is called a reservation, and that is an exception that India can claim, and that is on basically personal laws, that is laws which are applicable to us in India, whoever is in India, on the basis of religion, like Hindu personal law, in the Hindu Marriage and Divorce Act, the Indian Christian acts of Parsis about marriage, etc. All religions. Those are exceptions that India has carved out as when they acceded to CEDAW. Now, because of CEDAW, what happened in India was that a matter was moved in the Supreme Court on a rape in Rajasthan, and they asked for some sort of law dealing with sexual harassment. So the Supreme Court, in fact, passed what are known as the Visakha Guidelines. They have been incorporated in the prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. It's popularly known as POSH, but I call it POSH W. So sexual harassment is seen as and considered to be a violation of the right to equality, specifically gender equality and the right to life and liberty. And Articles 14, 15, 16, 19, and 21 deal with these aspects. Now you have to remember, India is a constitutionally governed country, like the United States. Unlike England, England doesn't have a written constitution. Moreover,
Anand ji, could you please move your slides? I think slides are static, they're not moving.
So I'm on this slide 5, the Constitution. So equality is actually the basis of sexual harassment law, and the Constitution, which is applicable to state entities, not to private entities. So National Chemical Laboratory, it's applicable. So the provisions of equality and non-discrimination are contained in Articles 14, 15, 16, 19 and 21. So 14 is the classical equality provision, equality before law and equal protection before law. I'm not going into details of each one of them. We can do that some other time. 15 is about non-discrimination on specific grounds as opposed to the general Article 14 equality and equal protection. And there cannot be any discrimination on grounds of religion, caste, sex, place of birth, etc. Then Article 15.3 actually allows the state to have special provisions for the benefit of women, and it is not considered discrimination. Article 16.1 and 2 is prohibition of discrimination generally, and also discrimination on the ground of sex in employment under the state. And these are the provisions for reservations, basically. 19.1G is the fundamental right to practice any profession or carry out any occupation, trade or business. And Article 21 is important. And basically it talks of no person's life or liberty can be deprived except according to procedure established by law. Let me explain. For example, if I'm convicted, if I'm prosecuted first for a case of murder, I have to be actually charged in a court of law for murder. A trial has to take place. I have to be pronounced guilty and then sentenced. That is the procedure established by law. If you do not follow the procedure established by law, then the sentence and the conviction can be set aside. But it has been held by the Supreme Court that both the substantive law, that is murder 302, and the procedure must be fair, just and reasonable. Now that's one part of it. But very importantly, Article 21 has been read to include, and that's the beauty of the constitutional interpretation, that these rights are not fixed or cast in stone. They are interpreted over a period of time and they change their colors. But as it reads, it's a negative injunction against the state. No person shall be deprived of liberty or life except by procedure established by law, which is an injunction against the state. But it has been read following a very famous case of an Irish prisoner, Francis Coralie Moulin, which said that any person's life or liberty cannot be deprived except if dignity is not accorded to that person. So when you're in prison, when I'm in prison as a convict, I cannot be deprived of my dignity. In fact, I just argued this before the High Court just now when I came out of it, and the judge asked me, but Mr. Grover, isn't it deprivation of dignity when you're put in prison? It is partial, but all your rights except the right to move freely throughout the territory of India, those rights which are not connected with that are kept alive. For example, do you have access to good food, nutritious food? That is life with dignity. And from that, they read in the fundamental right to education, health, etc., which is very important. Now, so sexual harassment is to do with equality and equal protection and dignity. Now, while the Sexual Harassment Act was actually enacted, at the same time, there was an amendment to the criminal law, and they've also brought in criminal punishments called sexual harassment in the IPC. So 354A is a crime of sexual harassment, 354B assault or use of a criminal force on a woman with the intent to derobe. Section 354C voyeurism, stalking 354D, and sexual assault, which is rape. Then section 509, words or gestures or act intended to insult the modesty of a woman. 376 is of course rape. Sexual assault, the punishment. 375 is the definition. At the same time, in 2013, they brought in the Sexual Harassment Act at the workplace. And the object was to provide protection to women. It's gender specific. So a man cannot be sexually harassed in India, though that is changing around the world. Sexual harassment can be by any gender. But in India, it is restricted to sexual harassment of women by men. Transgenders are not contemplated, except if there's a trans woman, maybe she would be considered a woman. Okay? Or if the trans man actually harasses a woman, then that may be a case of sexual harassment. That aside, let's see what it actually means. Basically, it's a conduct by a man which is considered to be unwelcome by a woman. What are those? It's physical contact or advances. I hope you understand that. But if you don't, we have time to discuss and ask questions. So if I as a man contact a woman physically and make advances and the woman doesn't welcome it, that would be sexual harassment. Okay, a demand or a request for a sexual favor. Sexually colored remarks made. Any other unwelcome physical, verbal or non-verbal conduct of a sexual nature is also sexual harassment. Showing pornography without the consent. Of course, somebody will say, I want to see pornography. Then it's a different thing. But we are just showing pornography without another person's consent, a woman, then it will be considered sexual harassment. Any other unwelcome, that's actually repeated, I'm sorry. Now, also, this is defined in the Act under Section 2N. Similarly, in 3.2, there are certain circumstances which may amount to sexual harassment. And these don't have to be explicit, they can be implied. Promise of preferential treatment in her employment. If you come with me to a restaurant or a hotel, a boss says, a male boss says to his female assistant, then I will give you a promotion. That will be sexual harassment. Threat of detrimental treatment. That's a converse. Rather than treating a person preferentially, a woman, treating her detrimentally because something is not agreed to, that will also be sexual harassment. Then giving a threat connected with sexual favors. Actions that interfere with her work or creating an intimidating or offensive hostile working environment for the woman would also be sexual harassment. Again, humiliating treatment likely to affect her health and safety. These are very broad terms. So as the Act is interpreted, they'll become more and more specific. You can ask questions later on that. So what does unwelcome mean? It's not actually defined in the Act, but includes employing, not soliciting or inciting a particular behavior. Employed regarding the conduct as undesirable or offensive. Any sexual conduct so blatant that it's inherently offensive and unwelcome. For example, if a man exposes himself in the workplace, that's inherently offensive. But there is a distinction in the contacts that are invited or uninvited, but welcome. Offensive but tolerated. Offensive and flatly rejected. So it's very important how the woman sees that conduct. So if she doesn't welcome it and makes it explicit, and more the reason for a woman to make it explicit that she doesn't welcome it, then it will definitely amount to sexual harassment. The problem is that we find that these are activities which are cajoled by the man in a position of dominance, and the woman just doesn't accept it, but goes along with it and never makes it explicit that it's welcome or unwelcome. So it's very important for a woman to make explicit that a particular conduct is unwelcome. Otherwise, there can be dispute, like it happens in rape cases. Oh, well, the woman took the man to her house and they were drinking, and then, he started putting his hand on her shoulder, etc., etc. And it is made out that it was welcome. So in the workplace, it's a very different scenario, but the workplace is not meant for any kind of close physical relationships. So any kind of advance towards that can be put a stop to by a woman by saying, sorry, I don't agree with it. And then it's explicit. But of course, also it happens as it were behind closed doors in settings which other people do not witness those behaviors or conducts or acts. But in a workplace setting, if it continues, others do see something. So that's the time for the others to also ask the concerned person, the woman, if everything is okay, as it were. So the work environment also is very important. If it becomes hostile, unwelcome sexual behavior directed at an employee because of the gender that is offensive, hostile, or intimidating, and adversely affects the employee's ability to do a job, is also sexual harassment. The examples are, calling a woman names, turning the discussion to sexual topics, repeatedly asking out a person who's not interested or refused advances. Oh, you are just being difficult. Why don't you come for lunch? You don't like me, etc., etc. Constantly looking a person up and down, what known as elevator eyes, giving letters, gifts, or materials of a sexual nature, when it is unwelcome, either explicitly or implicitly. So the work environment does become hostile, but it all depends on circumstances. Is it frequent and very severe? Does it affect the employee's work? Is it repeated conduct? So these are things that are indication of how it should be not conducted. Then, apart from hostile environment, there can be what is called quid pro quo sexual harassment. The supervisor or the boss makes the sexual advances on the basis of satisfaction of a particular condition, promotion or no promotion, or giving long working hours, or giving short working hours, or giving leave, etc., on the basis of some sort of quid pro quo and sexual demands. So these are also sexual harassments at the workplace, but these are instances at the behest of the supervisor or the boss, not at the behest of the aggrieved woman. So what are desired behaviors? The desired behaviors are, not surprisingly, respectful physical distance when speaking to a colleague. How do you learn this? As I said earlier, you learn this when you are brought up, when you are young, that you should be respectful of another person's physical bodily integrity as well as their space. Hands-off policy, not touching colleagues on any part of the body for any reason whatsoever. Taking care to use respectful language when talking to co-workers. I remember when I was a student, a lot of expletive words were used all the time when talking to people by friends of mine. And then we had to consciously, I was the deputy president of my students' union, and I had a responsibility to check these things. This is a very long time ago, in early 70s. So to actually make sure that people respect others, you also have to respect how a person uses their language. Even respect for surroundings and people around you when you make jokes. As you know, a lot of jokes are cracked at the expense of a woman, or at the expense of minorities, or at the expense of persons with disabilities. Those are not pleasant jokes. These are not respectful jokes. And unfortunately, men make them more than women. Very few women also make them, but generally men do make derisory remarks about women, even in their presence. I, for one, whenever we are in company of only males, I make it clear that this is not acceptable. But you have to be brought up. My mother was very particular. She told me and my brothers and my sister that you shall not treat a woman with disrespect. And that is when we were not even our teens, we were like 6 and 7, because there was a neighbor to us who was being treated very badly by her husband. And my mother was a friend of her, and she told us this is what's happening. And she told us and inculcated in our minds that we shall not behave like that. So it really depends on how you're brought up. And that starts, as I said, early in childhood. So how one is brought up is very much indicative of how they will behave. It's not that you cannot change. I think we can change people even later in life, but the underlying condition is always there. So this is why we need to make sure that everybody in school and at home is actually inculcated with responsible or what is called correct behavior. What is unacceptable? Senior implying that the employee needs to have physical relationship to keep her job. Demeaning comments about the women, colleagues, customers, clients, vendors. If you make demeaning comments about anybody in front of a woman, it also reflects on how you treat a woman. An employee is made uncomfortable by team members who regularly tell explicit jokes which are sexually explicit. An employee pinching and fondling a co-worker against a will. Posting sexually explicit jokes on an office internet bulletin board. Sending emails or SMSs to co-workers that contain sexually explicit jokes and language. Co-worker stands physically very close to a colleague when looking over a shoulder at computer monitor desks. Now, this is a difficult one because when you are teaching somebody to use a computer, you are bound to be close to that person. But I think most people understand and they will know when the line is crossed. So if the line is being crossed, it is the responsibility of a woman who has to be inculcated with and empowered to say, sorry, I'm not accepting it. So I think in all establishments, one has to empower women and say, look, you must say it's not acceptable. A lot of people will say, no, this woman has become very strident. She's very curt and all. No, that's how you have to be in a situation where, really speaking, a lot of discriminatory behavior is commonplace in our society. Again, seniors giving rewards to women on personal favors in sexual harassment, abetting harassment of a colleague, is also harassment. The favored woman actually harassing a colleague who's not favored. So that's another thing. So I've drawn a diagram trying to make it simple. So either one of them or the combination of it can constitute sexual harassment. Physical is obviously very easy to understand. Verbal is also easy, but it can be non-verbal also, like standing very close, as I said earlier. They're all part of sexual harassment. So unwelcome physical contact, touching, hugging, kissing, pinching, flirting, brushing up against the person, blocking in a person's path, that's unwelcome physical contact. Then there's unwelcome verbal behavior, obscenities, suggestive comments or jokes, sexual propositions, inappropriate sexual humor, it should be threats, remarks about physical attributes. Oh my God, you're looking very nice. That dress suits you very well. Why don't you have it higher than the knee? Or your blouse is looking very good, Then unwelcome non-verbal behavior, staring, obscene gesture, sexually suggestive glances. I think these are things that are not easy to understand, but I think most women now realize this is quite common. Suggestive noises, sexual contact on print and electronic media. So these are the type of behaviors which are unwelcome. There are managers' responsibilities also. So while there are the conducts which are unwelcome, there is a duty cast on the employer or the manager or the supervisor to make sure that they do draw the line between sexual harassment and just official work. So they have to communicate policies, written policies, to make sure that sexual harassment doesn't work. I'll give you an example. I teach at foreign universities, Georgetown Law Center. I teach every year. We get the latest sexual harassment guidelines. For example, the way you have to conduct with students or co-professors or co-workers who are not teaching staff. You have to be, and there it's sexually neutral, gender neutral. So even a woman can harass a man, but generally that's not the case. It's mostly the women who are harassed. So they are very serious about it. If there's any complaint, you can be taken to task and your career can be ruined. So there it's very, very difficult to conduct yourself that the way we conduct here. Here it's not so strict because institutions are not serious about sexual harassment at the workplace. So not only do you have to have a written policy, I don't know, Does National Chemical Laboratory have a written policy? Let me know. Do you have a written policy? Sarika ji?
I'm not aware of. Actually, Anu.
No, if you don't know, there's a reason to know. That's very important. So first thing you have to start tomorrow is I want a written policy given to me. Okay, everybody should have a written policy available to them. That's the first thing you must start with tomorrow. Then encourage employees to come when there is a potential harassment taking place or potential likely to take place. So the manager should be able to say to his staff, look, if there's anybody who misbehaves, please come and talk to me and I will take action, either reprimand, whatever. And the manager must know what is going on so that any kind of attempt to start sexual harassment is nipped in the bud. Then always provide prompt and appropriate action to resolve sexual harassment claims by a fair, impartial, thorough investigation. You don't have to do it. Sometimes the person will say, okay, I'm sorry, but the person has to be called, and I believe they have to be counseled. Suppose I were the boss or the manager or the supervisor in a particular institution, and one woman employee makes a complaint. I would call her and say, look, you tell me the exact thing, what happened. I'll first ask him orally and see what he has to say. Or I take it down in writing, whatever. And then if he says, I'm sorry, I'll say, okay, you're sorry, but it can happen again because you've done it once. You've not been counseled. There's a need to counsel people and see the change in the behavior, or let them do sessions of counseling with a professional counselor. So you need to set up these institutions. But also sexual harassment can take place between each sex, within the same sex and opposite sex. But unfortunately, our law doesn't accept sexual harassment by a woman against a woman or by a woman against a man. That will change over a period of time. Like, for example, now we are talking of rape law to change, etc. Monitoring the situation is very, very important. So the manager has to have her or his ears on the ground and eyes open. Whenever something like that happens, all of it is to be initially treated as confidential so that people repose confidence in the manager that she or he can resolve the situation, ideally resolve it. Sometimes the harassment is by a third party, not your co-worker, but the client, customers, vendors, independent contractors, or employees of contractors of different companies. They're outsiders, they're not directly the employer's responsibility, but they are in law the responsibility of the employer in the same sense. So the employer has to take steps to put a stop to it or face legal liability. So in the Visakha Guidelines, it's laid down that the employer has to take reasonable steps and reasonable measures to assist the affected persons. And central governments also have guidelines, and you have to check up whether the National Chemical Laboratory has it to adopt suitable measures to ensure that the guidelines laid down in the order are observed by the employers, not only in the public but the private sector. So they can be lodging a complaint. If the complaint is lodged in writing, then you have to set up internal complaints committee. In the case of third-party harassment, the question is which company, outsider or the insider. So basically the responsibility is of both the companies, and the woman can complain in either of them. But she can also complain to the police because, as you notice, there is a criminal offense in sexual harassment. So it's very serious. So the option of the aggrieved person is to file a complaint either in our own company or the third party company. Then the organization can start a discussion if you filed it with the other company. If you don't have an ICC can be set up, but the other ICC can also be used. So basically you have the option of going with your own company or the other company. and you can file also a complaint to the police. So let's see, the grievance redressal procedure is you have an incident, you have 3 months to file a complaint after the incident. If the complaint is filed after 3 months, the company has to record the reasons in writing why there's a delay, and the employee can settle. So you don't have to go for a full-fledged inquiry. If there's a settlement, it can be monetary, non-monetary, and the ICC can record a settlement if there's an ICC, and nothing happens further. But if there's an inquiry, then it's also possible to settle it there and then. Now, inquiries are set up by the company. You have to have a third party from outside. One woman of the inquiry committee has to be from outside. Inquiry committee will submit its report, is not final. It's submitted to the employer. If the allegation is proved, then punishment as per the rules and compensation. If it is not proved, then you have to see whether the charges are actually false or not. And unfortunately, oh my God, if the allegations are malicious, then the complainant can face further punishment, provided it was not malicious. So after the internal complaints committee arrives at a conclusion and the allegation has been proved, the committee can recommend to the employer to take various actions: written apology, warning, reprimand, censure, withholding of promotion, withholding of pay rise and increments, terminating the respondent from service, undergoing a counseling session, or carrying out community work. Now, all this is ultimately then amenable to court processes. If you're a national chemical laboratory, then normally the party would go to the High Court, either one of them, the complainant or the person who has been found to be guilty, through a writ jurisdiction. Otherwise, they go to a regular court. And during the pendency of the inquiry, there can be written request by the aggrieved woman to transfer herself or transfer the abuser, or grant leave till the inquiry is over, so that she doesn't have to face up to that man all the time. Compensation can be given on the basis of mental trauma, pain, suffering, emotional distress, and even on loss in career opportunity due to the incident. Medical expenses incurred, because if there is harassment, people face a lot of mental health problems. And it depends on the income and financial status of the respondent, and even lump sum can be ordered or installments. If ICC is not set up, there can be penalties. If there is contravention of the Act, there can be penalties. But all offences under the statute are non-cognizable, so the police cannot arrest without the warrant of a magistrate. So that's the sum and substance of the thing. I want to read out a poem by a woman in the context of how women are treated in our society. But this is not about our society now. It's the time when the Taj was built. And it reads as follows. They tell you it's a wonder, a memorial to love. Shah Jahan for Mumtaz, his wife, and perhaps by extension of all men for their wives, and vice versa. Why not? Even for the very concept of love, and not the earthly. That words can never do it justice, nor the glossy photos in the coffee table books. Plus, there's a poignant fact. Jahan was imprisoned across the river by his son Aurangzeb just before the dome was finally joined, and thus condemned to view the finished edifice he never entered every day those last few years of his long life. So you show up at 6 a.m., part the burgeoning horde of vendors, already your sweatshirt soaked, gloom to your back, and lo, shimmering at a distance, immaculate, white marble and twined waterborne white reflection, filling the archway with that roseate glow, taking everyone's breath and yours as it was meant to do. But they don't tell you Mumtaz had 14 children and died in childbirth at 38, and Jahan had many other wives who comforted him and bore him many children. while he held dominion 2 more decades before Aurangzeb began to reign. So that's how women were treated in that time. And really, are they treated so differently today? That's the question. Thank you very much.
Anand, I just want to correct myself. Our director, Dr. Ashish Clearly, is also present here. He mentioned that CSIR has, there is a sexual harassment policy, like ethics policy of CSIR. NCL is a part of this bigger organization, CSIR, and we do have committees, like we have sexual harassment committee also in our institution, and also Visakha policy is followed, like Visakha guidelines is followed.
So anyway, what you should do is everybody should have a copy of it. Everybody should know. Both men and women should get the copies. I think the director would be very happy to circulate them, because that's a good thing that, and most state organizations have a policy and they circulate them. Anyway, I think it's a responsibility of all of us to know what the policy is. So it'll be good if we can circulate them.
Yeah, Anandji, actually we will put it up in our website. Actually, it was planned, but somehow it got delayed.
Very good.
Yeah, so we will be doing it and we will put it up on.
Also, I think you should have regular, once a month or once, whatever you feel, sessions on this when you also invite men. And let it start with 1 or 2 men and see how they feel. Let's encourage men to come out, and if they have any ideas about it, discuss them. I'm willing to help you on that. So I'll be the man who will try to help other men. I used to run an organization with friends of mine, Men Against Violence Against Women, MAVA. And then it took on its own when I was just starting out as a lawyer. It was quite successful because men started talking about violence against women. So similarly, you can have men against sexual harassment against women. So I think there are lots of initiatives, but first women should talk. You should have sessions amongst yourselves first and see whether anybody has faced anything. The idea is not to punish. The idea is to get people to talk and see how we can solve the problem. Any questions?
Yeah, I would like to request my colleague Durba, who would like to ask a question.
Hi, Anandji. This is Durba. This is not Anu. So I just wanted to take up from what you just said. The idea is to get people to talk and to get more diversity in the spaces, because you see there are a lot of women scientists here. There are not perhaps so many men scientists that you see over here. So what are your thoughts of how to make people talk and how to get this discussion going?
I think tomorrow, there'll be a topic, or there was a discussion on this. So you ask the men, what do you feel about it? That's the way to start a conversation. You don't have to be aggressive or are you a person who, we had a discussion yesterday. Anand Grover, who's a lawyer, presented this. What do you think about it? What would you like to talk about it? Let's have a discussion about it. Will you come if we have a short meeting? Things like that. I think you can start. I'll give you an example. Durbaji, I did a lot of HIV work from 1988 to even now it's going on, but really in the last decade, 2005, because then we were over the hill, as it were. One of the major issues was having mothers to talk to their daughters about sex. Okay, you have to keep on talking about it. The reason I say this is, and it's a very funny experience, funny meaning unusual experience I had. But before I did this HIV work, I already had training on discussion on sexuality issues, because I used to teach while I was studying law in 1977 to 81, 78 to 81. I was teaching at a school. Teaching is my first love. So I teach a lot. So I was teaching at Green Lawn schools, the secondary school, from primary to secondary. I was teaching science, by the way, physics, chemistry, biology. Yeah, I'm a biochemist. I did my undergraduate in biochemistry at Surrey University. So basically, I'm a science person. So I do a lot of pattern work because of that. Medicines, because I know about medicines and chemicals and all. But anyway, so when I was teaching at Green Lawns, I'm giving you this anecdotal evidence. So I was teaching, I was very friendly to the students in terms of encouraging everybody to do what they like to do. For example, I was doing not only physics, mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology, but also I used to do PT work. Okay, so I used to make young boys and girls run, and I would say, okay, all the boys and girls run together. Okay, it was not separate, and some of the girls ran faster than the boys. So that was good because then the boys understood that this teacher's got something to say, but they were not so forthcoming. And one day I got a very strange request from the young women. They were hardly about 11. And they said, sir, you are so friendly. You always answer our questions. We want you to take sex education classes. I said, hold on. This is a difficult topic. I will not agree to that unless I have a female teacher with me. Plus, the principal has to agree. Plus, your parents have to agree. Anyway, to cut the long story short, it happened, and you won't believe it. Only girl students came, and they asked everything under the sun. You'll be shocked, because people think, oh, what do they know? They know everything. Okay, and now even more. So it's very important to talk to young children like adults. When I've taught young kids, even now I get classes and I treat them as adults. And so they talk to me like as if I'm their friend. It's very important to start talking to another person as a friend, even though they may be hostile in their attitude on that topic. If you can start a conversation with anybody, it's great. But it may not be one-to-one. It may be in a group of 20, 30 people when there's a lecture on it or discussion. That's what you have to do. In my opinion, it's a responsibility historically bestowed on women who are very, bright, because you're scientists. I consider scientists to be very bright people. Not that I'm also an artistic person, so I'm not weighing anybody in balance. But science has always been a domain of men. But to see women now is really good. I mean, in my class, there were equal number of women. But when they got jobs, it was very different. Even in England, by the way. And we know the history of women scientists all over the world. So I think the responsibility is bestowed on you people to start that conversation. It's a friendly conversation, not a aggressive and hostile thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Get it back to Anu. There seems to be a question from Apurva. Apurva Ram, do you want to?
Yeah, I can see the question of Apurva Ram, but I would like to, if she wants to ask herself, it'll be nice. But otherwise, if you want me to answer immediately, I can do that. Whatever Apurva ji thinks. Since
Apurva is not responding, if you could read.
Yeah, so there's an alternative. One can go to the police, but there's a downside with the police. Unless you have a lawyer helping you out, police is an unruly beast. Let me tell you very frankly. They can take advantage of you and even advantage of the accused. And if the officer is not upright, things can go wrong. So I would always try the first route through the local committee or the local officer who's the complaints officer. You should have, I think there are lots of lacunae in the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. You need to have a complaints officer who you complain to, and the complaints officer should actually then call the person, and then maybe there's a discussion. If a woman doesn't want to aggravate the situation, she will say, I want an apology. Maybe I just want an apology. I don't want to go to the extent of having a sort of a whole committee, ICC, going through the evidence and all that, and then things break down. Try that first, and then always try to have a adversarial approach first. And if it doesn't work, if you're not satisfied, what do you want? You have to be careful about. Do you want an apology? Do you want a person to remedy his behavior, change? You have to know. I think the most important thing is the behavior must change internally and externally, because the person should become a different individual. If that can be done in any manner, then it's up to you to decide what you want and then go accordingly on advice. You can go to the police, but then sometimes you can't go back because it becomes very difficult. Okay, then Ashish Lele. There's a man, Ashish Lele. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. So he says already circulated. Is that the director, by the way? I think
Yes,
Sarika ji,
Yes,
Dr.
this is
Ashish Lele has said. So
yeah.
Yes, thank you. So he has said it is circulated. It's discussed. We should reiterate. He agrees. He agrees there should be meetings, but he's put a button. I don't know what does the but mean, but I think you should. It's a very encouraging message. You should take advantage of Dr. Lele's response and say, look, let's have meetings, more meetings. So that's one thing. Then there is Chetan Gadgil. There's another man. There's an article on PANA's mandatory reporting, or mandatory recorded report equal to ICC. When they got to know, yes, it's true, you need to do it, but I think personally, even issues of rape, I've come across cases of rape of underage, that is children. I did a case where that young child did not want it to go. You have to be very sensitive to the feeling of the, I don't like to use the word victim, but the aggrieved person. Because the victim has this connotation of no strength and this sort of thing. So the aggrieved person's actual feelings after advice, this is the lay of the land, this is what you can do. Now you take a call, what do you want to do? That sensitivity has to be there. Mandatory reporting becomes a problematic thing, especially in sexual assaults. So they can't, sometimes when mandatory reporting is resorted to, they can't get help. This is another issue. So,
Anandji, I have a question. Can I come in?
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any other question.
And myself and Durba, we are a part of our ICC of NCL. See, in NCL, normally we have students who are coming like after their masters, so they are at least like the age of 22. But what we are seeing is like they are so scared to talk. I mean, even like going to police or even coming to ICC becomes the later stages. And we really would like to your advice, like how to go about it. Like, I mean, how to make people talk about the problems if they have. I mean, we have during our orientation course, we talk to them about gender equality and what we can do for them and everything we explain them. But still we feel that they have a hesitation or sometimes they don't try or they don't want to report. So,
well, that's exactly what I was trying to say about mandatory reporting and going straight to the police. Then there's a no return kind of thing generally. So I think there should be stages, like you should ideally, in my opinion, there are a lot of lacunae in the Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Act. For example, you have to have an external person as a member of ICC. It just doesn't work, you know. But forget that. If there's a person in the institution who has the credibility to be able to listen to an aggrieved person and keep it confidential, you know, then advise the person on what are the options in terms of, okay, you don't want to proceed, this is the thing. You want to proceed, there is the ICC. You want to proceed, there is the police. But it is your decision. What is it that you want? A lot of women I have talked to, they want the person to admit his fault. Okay, they're not interested in punishing. You know, we are not built to punish people. As human beings, But there are people who want punishment also. Okay, so we need to cater for a range of options for the aggrieved person. So the first stage is to be able to have a sympathetic ear for the aggrieved person. You have to inculcate, and if you demonstrate it in one case, maybe it will improve further. So you have to try it out. And these are not, cast in stone. You'll have to be flexible and say, okay, we are ready to listen. If you don't want to take further action, it's a different thing. But obviously, most women want to take it up to a certain extent. And I can tell you, most women want acknowledgement that they've been wronged and an apology from the person. And that can be done without making it public also. You can have different options. You can say that, look, this, or you can make it public. You have to take a call. If it goes to the police, then there's no way you can stop anything. So I think there should be room for different options by the institution, the redressal officer, as I would call that person, to be able to say, look, here it is. These are the various options. You take a call, but you can take a call even later. You have 3 months to do this thing, and even after 3 months, you can take action. But a lot of women don't even know their options. So this has to be publicized. This is what you can do. But it should not have a reaction from the men. Now it's going to be a problem area. Sorry.
Anandji, I want to interject and ask a question here.
Sure.
But what if the aggrieved party or the victim doesn't want to come forward? The sympathetic ear comes in only in the next stage. But how do we ensure that students come forward and talk?
First, you have to explain to them, like your orientation, that this is the procedure. But they think, like going to the police, there's no return, it's a waste of time. They have this notion that you go to the ICC, there's no return, my life is ruined. So you must have intermediate stages. Look, we can keep it confidential, we will not take it further. But if it's a serious thing, if you want to take it further, we can do it. You must be able to counsel the person. See, I do a lot of work with so many groups, and we have a procedure of dealing with these things by spending time with the clients or the aggrieved person. They should feel confident about you being able to redress their grievance. And that things don't come in very easily. They won't talk to you unless they feel. And students are there only temporarily. They think, why should I do it? If I do this, I'll have a problem. The lecturer or whoever it is will give me low marks, etc., etc. So there are lots of fears in their mind. So they should feel confident that their academic career is not ruined. All those things. There are lots of apprehensions that they have, that if they make a complaint, their life is ruined. Forget the aggressor. So that's why they don't want to make a complaint. A lot of people keep quiet, so they don't want to be known as, women who are busy making allegations against men. They don't want to be known like that because it's a career hazard. If you make a complaint and the things turned out to be false, it will actually affect your career adversely in the future. Let's be honest about it. Employers don't want to hire people who make complaints like this. So you have to be able to show to that person, look, if you make a complaint, we will keep it confidential. And you take a call, and if you find it is serious, with some gravity, with some weight, then you say, look, this is a case where you need to take it to the ICC. And then if a reference is asked, you should say it was serious, but the result is like that. That doesn't mean she's made a false complaint. So that is how you have to take it. You have to give that confidence to that aggrieved person. And most institutions have not been able to do it because they just not spend time on it. All of you are busy. Your scientific research is more important because your careers are at stake. Do you have a person who will actually spend time on this? It requires a lot of time. I can tell you that. When I was doing HIV work, I know how much time I had to spend just empowering people living with HIV. It's a lot of time. You have to go out of your way. So it affects your career. If you're a brilliant scientist, and I know scientists, I know they're into their lab. They're just there. They don't want to know anything. So they don't have the time for that. So I don't know, you have to make structures in your institution share responsibility. That's up to you. You know better than I do how you will do it. I can't advise you on that, but it requires a lot of effort. I can tell
Thank
you.
Ji. We will definitely get back to you, and probably, we could have some. There are a few of us who would be interested in taking this forward, talking to you, and bringing it back to NCL. So, I hope you will have the time.
I always have the time.
I
was very busy. Sarika ji told me to do this session, and I said I will never say no. And I'll tell you, I had a matter up to 5, just 10 to 5, and I told the judge I'm running away. And now I'm going to Delhi for matters tomorrow in the Supreme Court. But then I have to also act for the state of Bengal. So I have to be out to the airport by 9 o'clock. I have to take my flight. So I try to squeeze in. My partner Indira Jaising, she's always saying, why are you spending so much time on this? She does the same thing. So tell her. But that's how life is. If you're doing any public service, you have to spend time.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And, in the interest of time, if there are no more questions, let's all thank Anand Grover ji for giving this wonderful, enlightening talk on sexual harassment. And I'm sure if we have many more questions based on his current response, we can definitely contact him in the future. Thank you so much, Anand.
Certainly. Thank you.
So with this, we come to the end of our International Women's Day event for 2022. Let me just remind you that the theme this year is #BreakTheBias. So let's break the bias of all the stereotypes that we all hold. And before we end today's program, I would like to have the vote of thanks and thank the whole event management team. Mr. Sunil Patel, the event coordinator, and the whole event management committee, Dr. Nikhilesh Yadav, Ms. Sonali Bhatt, Mr. Balaji, Shri Ganesh Mane, Mr. Hare Krishna Punjal for the handling the virtual platform during the event and all the technical support. Shri Avinash Devtale and Shri Sanjay Askar for all the IT support and network connectivity, and also Mr. Sheikh for all his contributions.